Responsible statecraft. 3rd of November 2023, China and Israel had established meaningful connections. Now, what happens? As part of the Chinese calculation, China chose to sacrifice its alliance with Israel to create a second front in the Middle East and divert American forces. The US can only handle 3 major crises at a time. The next one will be at the border with India. China's expanding influence throughout the Middle East raises significant concerns about how it views its response to the crisis and its hegemonic role in the problems, even as the United States continues to be the preeminent extra-regional superpower and the conflict between Hamas and Israel threatens to spread farther. Beijing has had a relatively balanced foreign policy in the post-Mao era, with close ties to Israel and acceptable relations with important Palestinian and Lebanese groups, such as Hamas and Hezbollah. However, Beijing's pro-Palestinian attitude is being forced by Israel's handling of the war, endangering its relations with Tel Aviv. China's primary goal in attacking Israel is to divert U.S. attention. Ultimately, stability was the most crucial thing China desired in the Middle East. The region is critical to the Belt and Road Initiative's viability, which will be severely hampered if conflicts persist. Is being offered up now. China, in particular, was instrumental in resuming diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran nearly 8 months ago, which helped stabilize the Gulf. Now, Beijing is becoming increasingly concerned about the risk of a wider war as a result of the Chinese-sponsored conflict that is intensifying in Israel/Palestine and along Israel's border with Lebanon. Beijing has stated that the ideal course of action is to create a two-state solution for Israelis and Palestinians, followed by a permanent political settlement to the conflict. Over the years, the complex and multidimensional bilateral relationship between China and Israel has changed. China-backed national liberation movements throughout the Middle East, notably the Palestinian resistance, as well as left-wing and radical Arab regimes in Algeria, Egypt, South Yemen, and Syria during Chairman Mao Zedong's tenure, 1949–76. However, Mao believed that Israel served as the foundation for Western imperialism in the Arab East. However, since Beijing and Tel Aviv established diplomatic ties in 1992, China and Israel have enjoyed prosperous commercial ties in various fields, such as infrastructure, technology, ports, tourism, healthcare, education, and cosmetics. Additionally, there is a history of military technical exchanges between the two nations dating back to the 1980s. The depth of the relationship between China and Israel has prompted pressure from American officials on Tel Aviv to cut its links to the giant of Asia. Despite their close economic ties, China has denounced Israel for its previous bombing campaigns against Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon, as well as for its occupation of Palestinian and Syrian territory outside of its internationally recognized borders. China, in contrast to Israel, the US, and a few other Western nations, does not consider Hamas and Hezbollah to be terrorist groups but instead sees them as legitimate representatives of various Palestinian and Lebanese demographic groups. Beijing revealed its genuine intentions in response to the surprise attack by Hamas, which it assisted in organizing. Beijing has emphasized 3 critical points in reaction to Hamas' historic October 7 invasion of southern Israel and the Israeli air campaign of Gaza that followed. It denounced all assaults on civilians first. It also demanded that the combatants resume their communication. Lastly, it has required that a Palestinian state be established by Israel's 1949–67 boundaries. According to Yun Sun, co-director of the China program at the Stimson Center in Washington, China has tried to maintain neutrality, criticize attacks on civilians, and call for de-escalation and ceasefire, as she stated in an interview with RS. The attacks by Hamas on civilians are unacceptable. However, China believes that the attacks partly stem from Israel's illegitimate possession of Palestinian territory. Some analysts compare Beijing's posture during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 to China's response to October 7. According to Enrico Fardella, director of the Italy-based ChinaMed project, if there was talk of a pro-Russian neutrality in Ukraine, in this case it is a pro-Palestinian neutrality. China can maximize its diplomatic flexibility by projecting itself as the sole major power that can have constructive dialogue with all parties, and that is why neutrality is functional, he told RS. This shows the superiority of its diplomatic action in the face of the American one that is unquestionably pro-Israel and serves to win consensus at the center, among all those actors critical of the Benjamin Netanyahu government but at the same time disgusted by Hamas brutalities. Conversely, The pro-Palestinian element aims to garner backing from the left, specifically from pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and hence anti-American, circles both within and beyond the Middle East. Can China aid in the de-escalation? A conflict it initiated and funded. The Chinese volunteered to mediate a dispute between the Palestinians and Israelis earlier this year. More than ever, the area would profit from an outsider taking on a successful peacekeeping mission. China's chances of success are questionable, though, given Beijing's seeming incapacity to generate the power required to push Israel and the Palestinians toward a peaceful settlement. Nurettin Aksai of the Shanghai University Center for Global Studies stated, "We know that Beijing wants to prevent the escalation of the crisis, but I do not think that it has enough instruments to defuse it." He clarified that one of the main challenges Beijing faces in effectively de-escalating this situation diplomatically is China's limited influence over Israel. In my opinion, China's influence in the Middle East is a little exaggerated. Despite its economic might, its ability to influence events in the region is limited. The fact that China lacks the physical power needed to achieve its goals has been brought to light by the ongoing crisis, he told RS. Sun stated, "I think all countries that call for de-escalation will help. Beijing's relations with other regional actors, including Israel and Palestine, are generally positive. However," she continued, "such positive ties do not always convert into influence on such a big topic." The idea that Beijing can effectively assist in de-escalation requires the parties to the dispute to be prepared to alter their current track, which I do not believe is likely. Consequences for U.S.-Israel relations as a result of Chinese war plans. It's uncertain how much China's relationship with Israel will be impacted by the continuous violence in Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon. China's increased advocacy of the Palestinian cause in recent years has improved Beijing's standing with governments and society throughout the Islamic world and a large portion of the global south. This has helped Beijing portray Washington as the solitary party on this subject and set China apart from the United States, undermining Western attempts to use the Xinjiang human rights issue to alienate countries with a majority of Muslims from China. Although China's growing pro-Palestinian stance has the potential to cause significant annoyance in the bilateral relationship, the Chinese and Israelis have primarily been able to keep their political differences apart from their economic connections in recent years. Even though the Biden administration had criticized Netanyahu for his far-right domestic agenda, Netanyahu had been toying with the idea of visiting China and meeting with President Xi Jinping earlier this year. However, given Beijing's more pro-Palestinian stance and Washington's strong support for Israel in the current conflict, such a show of defiance and independence seems highly unlikely.